On November 15th, 2024, China did something that will change your life forever. They dumped $3 trillion worth of U.S. assets in coordinated silence. And if you're holding dollars right now, you need to understand what happens next. What I'm about to tell you isn't conspiracy theory. It isn't fear-mongering. It's happening right now in real time, and most Americans have absolutely no idea. While you were worrying about inflation and your grocery bills, China just launched the opening move in the greatest financial war in human history, and the weapon they're using, your dollar. Let me start by walking you through what actually went down on November 15th. Because if you're getting your news from CNN or Fox, you're being fed a sanitized version of reality. They are too busy manufacturing outrage over culture wars to tell you that the financial ground beneath your feet just shifted. Here's what happened in the rooms where real power moves. China's central bank, the People's Bank of China, began systematically liquidating U.S. Treasury bonds. Not a modest portfolio adjustment, not a tactical rebalancing, $3 trillion. That's more than the entire British economy. It's larger than India's GDP. It's enough to buy Apple, Microsoft, and Alphabet combined and still have change left over. And here's the part that should terrify you. They did it quietly. No press releases, no announcements. They moved through shadow networks, offshore vehicles, sovereign wealth fund proxies, shell structures most people don't even know exist. How do we know this happened? Because people like me track the Federal Reserve's custody accounts. We watch the Treasury international capital flows that get published monthly. And what those numbers are screaming right now is unmistakable. China is exiting the dollar system in coordinated waves. Now maybe you're thinking, so China sold some bonds. Why should I care? That's the exact question I'm going to answer, because what's unfolding right now will touch every corner of your financial life. Your mortgage, your grocery bill, your retirement account, the dollars sitting in your checking account. Everything is on the table. Let me explain the architecture of what's been holding this whole system together for the past 50 years. The US dollar has been the world's reserve currency since the 1970s. What does that actually mean? It means that when countries trade with each other, when Japan buys oil from Saudi Arabia, when Germany imports steel from Brazil, they settle those transactions in dollars. Not yen, not euros, dollars. This system, often called the petrodollar arrangement, was locked into place in 1971. President Nixon took America off the gold standard and cut a deal with Saudi Arabia. You sell oil exclusively in dollars, and we provide military protection and weapons. Other oil producers followed. Suddenly, every nation on Earth needed massive dollar reserves just to buy energy and participate in global commerce. This gave the United States an almost supernatural advantage. We could print currency, and the world would absorb it because they needed dollars to function. Other countries had to produce actual goods and services to earn dollars. We just created them. It was the most elegant financial privilege in modern history. But here's the hinge point. That privilege depends entirely on trust. It requires the rest of the world to believe the dollar will hold value, that America won't abuse the printing press, that the system is fair, stable, and sustainable. And over the past 2 decades, that trust has been quietly crumbling. We've printed trillions to fund wars that went nowhere, bailouts for banks that should have failed, and stimulus packages that fueled asset bubbles instead of productive growth. We turned the dollar into a weapon, freezing assets of countries we didn't like, cutting them off from the global payment system, proving to everyone watching that the dollar isn't neutral. It's a tool of American geopolitical power. China saw this. They studied every move. And while we were distracted by endless conflicts in the Middle East, they were building an alternative. The $3 trillion exodus isn't just a financial maneuver. It's the opening act of a new system, one where China, not America, sits at the center. One where the yuan, not the dollar, becomes the dominant currency. And they're not building this alone. Over the last decade, China has been assembling alliances. The BRICS bloc, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, represents over 40% of the world's population and a growing share of global GDP. In August 2023, BRICS expanded, inviting Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Egypt, Iran, and Ethiopia to join. Think about that for a second. Saudi Arabia, the country that made the petrodollar system possible, is now joining a coalition explicitly designed to move away from the dollar. And this isn't just about BRICS. China has been making bilateral currency swap agreements with dozens of countries across the globe. They've done deals with Russia to trade in rubles and yuan. Brazil agreed to settle trade in their respective currencies, completely bypassing the dollar. Argentina, despite its economic chaos, signed a currency swap with China. Pakistan, Bangladesh, even parts of Africa, all building direct currency bridges to Beijing. These aren't symbolic gestures. These are the building blocks of a parallel financial system. Every swap agreement is another crack in the dollar's foundation. Every bilateral trade deal settled in local currencies is another brick removed from the wall that has held American financial dominance in place for half a century. But the real weapon in China's arsenal? Gold. While America has been running up debt and printing money to cover it, China has been quietly accumulating gold on a scale most people can't even comprehend. Official numbers say around 2,000 tons. Independent analysts estimate it could be 20,000 to 30,000 tons, possibly more than the United States holds. And here's what makes this even more significant. China isn't just buying gold. They're building the infrastructure to control the global gold market. The Shanghai Gold Exchange now processes more physical gold than London's century-old market or New York's COMEX. They're not trading paper contracts. They're moving actual metal. Bars you can touch, weigh, and store. Why does this matter? Because gold is the ultimate form of money. It's been recognized as valuable for 5,000 years. You can't print it. You can't inflate it away. And if China backs the yuan with gold, even partially, it becomes a credible, hard money alternative to the dollar. Now imagine this scenario. China announces that the yuan is backed by gold. 1 yuan equals a fixed amount of gold, redeemable on demand. Suddenly, every country holding trillions in paper dollars is going to start reconsidering their position. A currency backed by something real is fundamentally more attractive than one backed by debt and promises. This is the endgame. This is what the $3 trillion liquidation is preparing for. China is exiting dollars now while they still have value before the stampede begins. And when other central banks figure out what's happening, when they realize China is serious about replacing the dollar, they're going to panic. They're going to start dumping their treasury holdings too. Every central bank on earth holds trillions in US debt. And if they all start selling at once, the dollar collapses. Let me walk you through what happens when the dollar loses its reserve status. This isn't speculation. This is what history shows us happens when a reserve currency fails. First, interest rates in America will spike. Right now, we borrow cheaply because foreign demand for treasury bonds is constant. But when that demand evaporates, when China and others are selling instead of buying, the US government will have to offer much higher rates to attract buyers. What does that mean for you? Your mortgage rate could go from 7% to 15%. Car loans double. Credit cards hit 35% or 40%. Borrowing becomes prohibitively expensive. The housing market collapses because nobody can afford payments. Businesses can't get capital. The economy freezes. And it's not just new loans. Think about what happens to the companies you work for. Corporations across America have gorged themselves on cheap debt for the past 15 years. They borrowed to buy back their own stock, to fund acquisitions, to expand operations. When interest rates double or triple, those debt payments become crushing. Companies start cutting costs. That means layoffs. That means your job. Second, inflation enters a new gear. When foreign countries no longer need dollars, all those dollars currently held overseas come flooding back into America. It's a phenomenon economists call reverse currency flow, and it's devastating. Trillions of extra dollars chasing the same amount of goods and services. Prices explode. We're not talking 8% inflation. We're talking Weimar Germany levels, Zimbabwe levels. Your groceries could double in price every few months. Your savings could lose half their value in a year. Picture this. You go to the grocery store on Monday and milk costs $5. You come back on Friday and it's $8. 2 weeks later, it's $12. Your paycheck stays the same, but everything you need to survive keeps getting more expensive. That's hyperinflation. And it destroys societies from the inside out. Third, America's standard of living plummets. Right now, we live beyond our means. We import more than we export. We consume more than we produce. We can only do this because the world accepts dollars in exchange for their goods. But when the dollar loses reserve status, that arrangement ends. Suddenly, we have to produce things of value to trade for the things we want. Imports become insanely expensive. Americans will have to accept a much lower standard of living. No more cheap electronics from China, no more affordable clothing from Bangladesh, no more inexpensive produce from Mexico. Everything costs more while real wages stagnate. The middle class, already squeezed for decades, gets crushed. Families that felt financially stable suddenly find themselves struggling to afford basics. Retirements get delayed or canceled. College becomes unaffordable for even more people. The American dream, already fading, becomes completely out of reach for millions. Fourth, the US government faces a fiscal crisis unlike anything in our history. We currently owe over $36 trillion, and we add trillions more every year. We can sustain this only because we can print money and other countries accept it. But when the dollar loses status, printing accelerates hyperinflation. So the government faces impossible choices: massive cuts to Social Security, Medicare, defense, or default on the debt. Either path leads to chaos. Think about what that means in practical terms. Social Security, checks that barely cover expenses, now suddenly buy half as much. Medicare coverage gets slashed, veterans' benefits get cut, infrastructure crumbles because there's no money to maintain it, the social safety net, already frayed, completely unravels. Now I know what you're thinking. Surely the government will stop this. They'll intervene. And yes, they'll try. But here's the problem. There's very little they can do at this stage. China has been preparing for 15 years. They've built the infrastructure, they've secured the alliances, they've accumulated the gold, they've created alternative payment systems like C-apps to compete with SWIFT. The Belt and Road Initiative wasn't just about infrastructure investment, it was about creating economic dependencies. Countries that owe China money, that rely on Chinese capital, that trade primarily with China, they're going to side with China when it matters. And what has America been doing? Fighting wars, printing money, weaponizing the dollar to punish enemies, proving to everyone that the system can't be trusted. Even our allies are hedging now. France and Germany want a European alternative. Japan is quietly diversifying reserves. Everyone sees where this is headed. The US could try raising interest rates dramatically to defend the dollar, but that would crash the economy immediately. They could impose capital controls, making it illegal to move money out of dollars, but that would destroy confidence even faster and signal we're in full crisis mode. They could try negotiating with China, but China holds all the leverage now. Why would they accept a deal when they're winning? The ugly truth is, we're watching the decline of American financial hegemony in real time. Just like the British pound lost reserve status to the dollar in the 20th century, the dollar is losing status to the yuan in the 21st. It's a natural cycle of empires, and once it starts, it's nearly impossible to stop. Let me give you the hard data that confirms what I'm telling you. According to the IMF, the dollar's share of global reserves has fallen from 71% in 1999 to under 59% today. That's a massive decline, and it's accelerating. China's yuan now accounts for over 2.5% of global reserves, up from essentially zero a decade ago. That might not sound like much, but the trajectory is what matters. It's growing exponentially while the dollar shrinks. Global trade settled in yuan has increased over 1,000% in the past 5 years. Major commodities, oil, natural gas, are increasingly traded in yuan instead of dollars. Russia and China conduct almost all bilateral trade in their own currencies now. $0 involved. The Shanghai Gold Exchange now handles more physical gold volume than London or New York combined. China is building the infrastructure to become the center of the global gold market. When you control the gold market, you control the benchmark for what money is worth. Saudi Arabia, which has sold oil exclusively in dollars since 1974, announced in 2023 that it's open to pricing oil in other currencies. That's not a minor shift. That's the foundational pillar of the petrodollar cracking. In June 2024, BRICS announced they're developing a new currency backed by a basket of commodities, including gold. They're literally building a dollar alternative from scratch. Over 40 countries have expressed interest in joining or participating. Indonesia, Mexico, Argentina, Nigeria, billions of people, trillions in GDP. The writing is on the wall. The dollar's dominance is ending. The only question is how fast and how chaotic the transition will be. And here's what really keeps me up at night: the timeline. This isn't something that's going to unfold over 20 or 30 years. Based on the pace of change, based on the acceleration of de-dollarization, based on the $3 trillion exodus that just happened, we're looking at 2 to 5 years before we hit the critical tipping point. That's not a lot of time. That's not enough time for most people to prepare. Most Americans have no idea this is happening. They're going to wake up one day and discover their dollars are worth half what they were. Their retirement accounts decimated, their savings gone. Now, let me be very clear, I'm not rooting for this. The collapse of the dollar will cause immense suffering for millions of Americans. People will lose jobs, homes, retirement savings. There will be unrest. But this was set in motion by decades of bad decisions. Endless money printing, reckless spending, weaponizing currency for politics, fighting wars we couldn't afford. The bill is coming due. You have to deal with reality as it is, not as you wish it were. And the reality is, the dollar is in decline. You need to protect yourself. Here's my timeline based on current trends. 2025. Continued quiet de-dollarization. More bilateral trade deals bypassing the dollar. More countries joining BRICS. Gold climbs as central banks accumulate. Mainstream media still ignores this. 2026, the tipping point. This is when I expect China to make a major move, either announcing yuan gold convertibility or launching the BRICS currency. The public starts waking up. The dollar declines noticeably. 2027, crisis mode. Rapid dollar devaluation. Inflation spikes. Interest rates forced higher. Stock volatility. Political chaos as government tries to respond. This is when most Americans realize their savings are in danger. 2028, 2030, the new normal. The dollar is no longer the dominant reserve currency. America's standard of living has declined. A new global financial order has emerged with China at the center. Could this happen faster? Absolutely. Could it be delayed? Possibly. But the direction is set. So what should you do right now? Step 1. Minimize cash holdings. Don't hold large amounts in dollar-denominated assets. Hold only 3 to 6 months of expenses in cash. Step 2, convert to hard assets. Real estate, especially income-producing property. Gold and silver, physical, not paper. Agricultural land, productive businesses that generate cash flow. These survive currency resets. Step 3, strategic debt. This is controversial, but consider fixed-rate debt to buy assets. A 30-year mortgage at 6% is a gift if inflation runs 10-15% for the next decade. You're borrowing money that inflates away while the asset appreciates. Step 4, watch the indicators. Track real inflation using independent sources. Watch bond yields. If 10-year Treasury yields spike above 6, 2, or 7%, that's creditors demanding higher returns because they see inflation risk. That's the signal we're entering the final stage. Step 5, don't assume you have 10 years. The pattern says 3 got done in 7 years from stage 3 to stage 6. We entered stage 3 in 2020. We might have until 2027, or it could accelerate, and hit by 2025, 2026. Be early, not on time. Step 6, diversify internationally. Don't keep all your assets in the United States, denominated in dollars, subject to U.S. government control. Open accounts in other countries if possible. Consider property overseas. Invest in foreign stocks and bonds. This isn't about being unpatriotic. It's about survival. Countries like Switzerland, Singapore, and Norway have much more stable currencies and financial systems right now. Step 7, build skills and relationships that have value independent of money. Learn to grow food. Learn to fix things. Build a network of people you can rely on. If the financial system really breaks down, the most valuable currency will be skills and community. I'm not talking about building a bunker, but basic resilience, being able to take care of yourself and your family without depending entirely on a functioning economy. 5 times in history, reserve currencies have collapsed. The British pound dominated for over a century, then lost status to the dollar within a few decades. It happened faster than anyone expected. The same thing is happening now. We're living through it, so it's harder to see. But the $3 trillion exodus is real. The de-dollarization is real. The timeline is compressed. You have maybe 2 to 3 years before this shifts from slow-moving crisis to acute emergency. Use that time wisely. I know this is painful to accept. It feels unpatriotic to prepare for dollar collapse. But protecting your family isn't betrayal. It's responsibility. The politicians, central bankers, and financial elites who created this mess aren't going to save you. They're already protected. They've already moved their money. The China exodus is the warning shot. If you understand what it means, you still have time to act. But that window is closing. Every day you wait, the situation gets worse. Every month that passes, more countries join the de-dollarization movement. Every quarter, the dollar loses more of its status. The question isn't whether this is going to happen. The question is whether you're going to be ready when it does. If this opened your eyes, share it. Send it to people who need to hear it. Subscribe if you haven't already. I'm tracking this story as it develops. This is the most important financial shift of our lifetime. Leave a comment and let me know. Have you started preparing? What steps are you taking? Thanks for watching. Stay alert, stay prepared, and whatever you do, don't keep all your eggs in the dollar basket.